Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Lost Spirits Before You Drift Off. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's story. Clara had always wanted a simple life away from the noise of the city, so when she found the little house in Harrow's End, it felt like a gift. The place was old, with peeling paint and a roof that creaked in the wind, but it was hers, surrounded by fields and a thick line of pines that swallowed the horizon. She spent her days unpacking, sipping the tea on the porch, and listening to the quiet, a stillness so deep it almost hummed. The backyard stretched out wide, dotted with wildflowers, and at its edge sat an old stone well covered with a wooden lid that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. She didn't think much of it at first, just a relic from whoever lived there before, but on her third night, as she lay in bed, she heard something faint, like a sigh drifting up from the ground. It was soft, easy to dismiss as the wind or a dream, but it came again the next night, and the night after that, a little clearer each time, until she couldn't ignore it any more. By the end of the week, Clara stood over that well in the moonlight, her heart thumping slow and steady, wondering what could whisper from a place so dark and deep. She lifted the lid that first time with careful hands, the wood rough against her fingers, and peered down into the blackness. The air smelled damp and earthy, like rain-soaked moss, and the well was silent at first, just a hollow circle staring back at her. She leaned closer, her shadow cutting across the stones, and then it came, a whisper, low and soft, like someone breathing words too quiet to catch. It wasn't a voice she knew, not loud or sharp, but it wrapped around her, pulling her in, and she stayed there listening until her legs ached from standing. The words didn't make sense, a jumble of sounds that slipped through her mind like water, but they felt alive, tugging at something inside her she couldn't name. Clara stepped back, her breath clouding in the cool night air, and told herself it was nothing, just an echo, or maybe a trick of the well's shape. But as she walked back to the house, the whispering followed, faint as a memory, curling around her ears. That night, she dreamed of a figure standing by the well, faceless and still, watching her sleep through the window. Days passed, and Clara tried to keep busy, watering plants, fixing shelves, anything to drown out the sound that wouldn't leave her alone. She'd hear it in the quiet moments when the wind died down or the birds stopped singing, a murmur rising from the backyard like a secret the earth couldn't keep. She didn't tell anyone. Harrow's End was small, and the few neighbors she'd met kept to themselves, their eyes sharp and knowing, as if they'd seen strangers come and go before. But one afternoon, an old man named Tom stopped by, delivering firewood, and noticed her glancing at the well. He didn't say much, just stacked the logs and muttered, "Best leave that alone, miss. It's been here longer than us." When she asked what he meant, he shrugged, his face creasing like old leather, and said the well had a history. Folks used to talk about voices, about things lost down there that never stayed gone. Clara laughed it off, but his words stuck, and that night the whispers grew louder, calling her name in a tone so gentle it felt like a lullaby. She couldn't stay away after that. Something about the well pulled her back night after night, like a thread tied to her shadow. She'd sit by it, the grass cool beneath her, and listen as the whispers wove stories she couldn't quite grasp. Tales of people who'd lived in that house, of promises made and broken, of a town that forgot what it buried. The voice wasn't angry or sad, just patient, like it had all the time in the world, and Clara found herself talking back, her voice soft against the dark. She'd ask questions. Who are you? What do you want? But the answers were never clear, just more whispers, layering over each other till they filled her head. One night she brought a lantern, its light trembling as she held it over the well, and saw something shift below. Not water, but a shimmer, like eyes catching the glow. Her breath caught, but she didn't run. She stayed, the whispers wrapping around her like a blanket, and when she finally stood, the night felt heavier, as if the well had claimed a piece of her she hadn't known was there. Weeks turned into months, and Clara changed. Her neighbors noticed it first, how she moved slower, her eyes distant, like she was listening to something they couldn't hear. She stopped leaving the house much, spending her days by the well, her hands tracing the stones as if they held answers. The whispers had become her company, a constant hum that drowned out the world, and she didn't mind. They weren't lonely, not really. One evening, Tom came by again, his truck rattling up the dirt road, and found her sitting there, staring into the well with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. He tried to pull her away, his voice rough with worry, but she shook her head and said, "It's okay. They're waiting for me." He left, uneasy, and told the town she'd lost her mind. But Clara didn't care. She'd found something in that well, something that knew her better than she knew herself, and it was calling her closer every night. The end came quietly, the way things do in places like Harrow's End. No one saw it happen, but they felt it, a shift in the air, a silence where the wind used to be. Clara's house stood empty one morning, her shoes left by the well, the lid off, and the town whispered among themselves. Some said she'd fallen in, others that she'd walked away. But Tom swore he'd heard something the night before, a sigh rising from the ground, long and low, like a door closing. They searched the well, dropped ropes and lights, but found nothing, just stone and shadow, deeper than it should have been. The whispers stopped after that, or so they thought, until a new family moved in years later and heard it too, a soft voice calling their names, patient and calm, waiting for them to listen. Clara's name joined the stories, a myth of the woman who heard too much, and if you visit Harrow's End today, they'll tell you to stay clear of that well, though some still hear it, late at night, a sound so gentle it could pull you under. That's where we leave Clara and her well, a tale of quiet mystery that settles into the corners of your mind. Let it rest there as your breathing slows, your thoughts soften, and the world slips away. We've got 19 more stories to go, each one a step deeper into the shadows. But for now, let this one carry you toward sleep, a whisper in the dark that's yours alone. Rest easy, or at least let your dreams take you where they will. Another tale waits just around the corner. Amos arrived in Harrow's End on a gray afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs low and the air feels thick with something unspoken. He'd bought Clara's old house sight unseen, a bargain too good to pass up, and drove up from the city with a truck full of boxes and a need to start over. The town was smaller than he'd expected, just a handful of houses scattered along a winding road, framed by pines that leaned in like they were listening. The real estate agent had warned him the place needed work, peeling paint, a sagging porch, but said nothing about the well in the backyard, its stone rim poking up through the grass like a forgotten marker. Amos noticed it his first day, standing there with a coffee mug in hand, the quiet of the place settling over him like a heavy coat. It didn't bother him much. Old houses came with oddities, and he figured it was just a dry relic, something to patch up or ignore. That night, though, as he unpacked in the dim glow of a single lamp, he heard it, a whisper, faint and far off, rising from the ground outside his window. He didn't think much of it at first, chalking it up to the wind or the house settling, but it came again the next night, clearer now, like someone murmuring just beyond the walls. Amos was a practical man, not given to ghost stories or flights of fancy. He'd spent years fixing cars, his hands stained with grease, his mind on the next job. But this sound gnawed at him, soft and persistent, slipping under his skin. He stepped outside in his boots and jacket, the air cold against his face, and walked to the well, its wooden lid still off from whoever left it that way. The whispering stopped when he got close, the silence so thick it pressed against his ears, and he leaned over, peering into the dark. Nothing moved down there, no glint of water or rustle of leaves, just a deep, empty black that seemed to swallow the moonlight. He stood there a long time, waiting, but the night stayed quiet, and he went back inside, telling himself it was nothing, just a tired mind playing tricks after a long drive. The whispers didn't stay gone. They crept back the next evening, louder this time, threading through the hum of the crickets outside. Amos was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when they started, a low murmur that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He turned off the faucet, listening hard, and realized it wasn't random noise. It was a voice, or maybe more than one, weaving together in a rhythm he couldn't follow. He dried his hands and went to the well again, the grass crunching under his feet, and this time he brought a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark. The light showed him the same stone walls, damp and mossy, descending into nothing. But as he stood there, the whispers grew, curling up from below like smoke. They called his name, soft, slow, Amos, Amos, and he froze, the flashlight shaking in his grip. It wasn't loud, not threatening, just calm and steady, like someone waiting for him to answer, and he felt a pull, a gentle tug deep in his chest, urging him to stay. He didn't tell anyone in town. He hadn't met many folks yet, just a nod from the store clerk and a wave from an old woman across the road. But the whispers followed him into the days, faint under the sound of his hammer as he fixed the porch, or the clink of his tools as he patched a leak. They were always there, a quiet hum at the edge of his hearing, and he started to listen closer, sitting by the well at night with a cup of tea growing cold in his hands. The voices told stories, fragments of lives he didn't know, names, promises, moments of loss, and he found himself nodding along as if they were old friends sharing secrets. One night, he spoke back, his voice rough from disuse, asking, "Who are you?" The whispers paused, then swelled, not with answers, but with a feeling warm and heavy, like they were glad he'd finally joined them. He didn't sleep much after that, not because he was afraid, but because the well felt alive, and he didn't want to miss what it had to say. Weeks passed, and Amos settled into a strange rhythm, working on the house by day, listening to the well by night, the whispers his steady companions. He'd found an old journal in the attic, its pages yellowed and cramped with handwriting he couldn't quite read, but it mentioned the well, words like keeper and below standing out among the faded ink. He asked around town, casual like, and Tom, the firewood man, stopped by one afternoon, his eyes narrowing when Amos brought it up. "You hearing it too?" Tom asked, his voice low, and when Amos nodded, the old man sighed, stacking logs with slow, deliberate hands. He said Clara had heard it, that she'd sat by that well until it took her, and that it had been quiet since, until now. Tom didn't stay long, just warned him to cover it up and left. But Amos couldn't shake the story, and that night the whispers were sharper, calling him not just by name, but with a question. "Will you keep us?" The question stayed with him, looping through his mind as he worked, ate, slept, or tried to. He started seeing things by the well, not clear shapes, but flickers, shadows that moved when he blinked, a glint of something deep below that wasn't water. One evening, he brought a rope from his truck, tied it to a tree, and lowered himself down, the flashlight tucked in his belt. The walls were slick, the air cold and thick, and the whispers grew loud, filling his head until he couldn't hear his own breathing. He didn't go far, just a few feet, before his light caught a ledge, a narrow shelf of stone jutting out, and on it sat a box, small and wooden, carved with lines that looked like waves. His hand shook as he reached for it, the whispers buzzing around him, and when he touched it, they stopped. Complete silence, sudden and heavy, like the world held its breath. He climbed back up, box in hand, and sat by the well, staring at it under the stars, too rattled to open it yet. He kept the box on his kitchen table, its weight a quiet presence, and the whispers didn't come back. Not that night, not the next. The silence was worse somehow, an ache he hadn't expected, and he found himself missing the voices, their soft pull. On third night, he opened it, the lid creaking as he lifted it, and inside was a stone, smooth, black, warm to the touch, and a note, scribbled in a shaky hand. "The keeper holds the well holds the lost." He didn't understand, not fully, but when he held the stone, the whispers returned, faint at first, then steady, flowing through him like a river. They didn't ask anything now, just spoke, names, stories, a chorus of the gone. And Amos listened, night after night, his eyes growing heavy, his mind drifting. The town noticed him less, his truck staying parked, his lights dim, and when Tom came by again weeks later, he found a house quiet, the well uncovered, and Amos gone, the box empty on the table, the stone nowhere in sight.